welcome to our lesson for today. So today we're going to talk about how Absalom was, or how he behaved when he came back and lived in Jerusalem. Because remember, last time we told you how David was very upset that Absalom was away from him for 2 years, but he also could not overlook that he had killed Amnon. But then Joab found a way to convince him to allow Absalom to come back to Jerusalem. So Joab convinced the king to forgive Absalom, but David only forgave him a little bit because he was still upset about the death of Amnon. So David refused to see him, and he also refused for Absalom to live in the palace. So Absalom came back to Jerusalem and he was living on his own.
In another house. He had to find another house elsewhere. But he was glad. Absalom was glad to be back in Jerusalem, and he had all these big plans for himself,
for his future.
And he had all these things that he wanted to accomplish. He was very glad to be back in Jerusalem.
Yes. So Absalom thought he was the most good-looking man in the whole of the land, and he especially loved all of his hair. He loved his hair so much that he only had it cut once in the whole year. He only had it cut once, and he thought that his hair was worth its weight in gold. So he really loved this hair of his, and when he imagined himself for his future, he could see himself wearing the royal robes, with his long hair flowing, and with all of the powers of a king. But remember, David has still refused to see Absalom. So he began thinking, how am I going to be king?
How am I going to become king if my father won't even see me? And remember, we said that the king could choose who was going to be the next king. So he knew if he was not in good books with his father, there's no way he was going to be king. And then all these good looks were just going to waste. And he thought, no, that's not going to happen. So he sent for Joab angrily, and he said to Joab, what is the use of being here in Jerusalem if my father won't see me, if the king won't see me?
Exactly. And he was so angry because he had waited for 2 years. So remember, Absalom had been away from Jerusalem for 2 years. And then when he came back, David refused to see him for another 2 years. So by the time he was sending this message, he was very angry and upset. So Joab went and delivered this message to the king. And when David heard this, he agreed to see Absalom.
Yes, and Absalom was very happy when King David agreed to see him. So he went before the king, and then he bowed down.
He bowed down low. But instead, David, his father, went and he hugged him and he embraced him and he kissed him affectionately because he was happy his son was back.
His son was back, yes. And he did not even want to revenge again. He did not want to kill him because now he had decided to forgive him. But Absalom had different plans altogether.
Exactly.
He badly wanted to be a king.
He really wanted to be king.
Yes,
but he was not sure he could wait to be king after his father had died.
Yes, he was not sure he was going to wait for King David to die for him to become king. So he decided to start treating himself as a very important person.
Exactly.
So what he did, he got a chariot, and
the best chariot,
and he got horses, and then he also got 50 servants to serve him everywhere he went. So he had servants everywhere he went.
Exactly. So to the people, he looked like a very important person. And remember, the people had heard about how David had embraced Absalom and how they were friends again. So word had spread, and people had begun thinking maybe Absalom could be the next king. So after he looked like a very important person, he set out to make the people love him more than David.
Yes. So what Absalom would do, every morning he would go at the city gates, the gates of Jerusalem, and stand there with all his servants and his horse and his chariots, and then he would stand there and wait for everyone who was coming in to see King David. And then he would stop them and talk to them very nicely and ask them their names and what their
problems
were,
and anything that is going on. And then he would tell them, you are right. You deserve justice. But the king will be far too busy to even look after you. If only he would appoint me as the judge.
And soon everyone began to think Absalom would actually make a very good king because he's fair, he's
kind, he's friendly, and he's good looking too. Exactly. So After hearing this, Absalom continued to do this, and he did this for 4 years.
Yes.
And after he felt like it was the right time, Absalom ran away and he went to Hebron.
Yes.
Now remember, Hebron was once David's capital city, but after they moved to Jerusalem, it wasn't his capital city anymore.
Yes.
So that's where Absalom went. He went to Hebron because he was planning on raising an army.
Yes, so he wanted to raise an army, and then he sent out secret messengers to all the leaders of the tribes of Israel, and he told the people of Israel and the leaders that when you hear the trumpet sound, just shout, you together with your people,
Absalom is king.
So-
And that was Absalom's plan, to
Yes.
overthrow his father.
Yes, but really Absalom was very, very selfish.
100%
First of all,
selfish.
he thought he was good looking, like he felt he was the best looking man in Israel, which is not bad. But then what he did with that, he decided he was not even going to wait for his father to die for him to start acting as king. And then he went out to the city gates and he started making friends with all these people and turning them against the king, which was
Exactly.
very selfish because he wanted the people to love him and to make him king. So all these things that he did really was to benefit himself. Really, everything he did was because he was selfish. He wanted everything to be his.
Yes,
it was
and-
all about him
And him. And remember, David had forgiven him. He had killed his own half brother, but David had forgiven him
Yes.
and hugged him and embraced
Yes.
him and allowed him back into the family.
Yes.
But he was still only thinking about him.
Well, actually, what he did to his brother was like he
Terrible.
deserved to die because of what he did to his brother. But
Exactly.
instead, David overlooked that and agreed for him to come back to Jerusalem and even back to the palace. David agreed to
Absalom
see him.
was
But
just
Absalom was not
selfish.
even sorry about what he had done. He just wanted to be king. He badly wanted to be king. And this shows that Absalom was very selfish. So as children of God, we cannot
should
do
not be
that.
selfish.
We cannot be selfish. God says we need to love people. And when we love people, then that means we think of others better than ourselves. We think of others first and then we think of ourselves. Not that you should hate yourself, no, but you should not think that everything is about you.
And you should not
you,
want
and you.
everything
Yes.
to be yours, and you should not try and take it and
Yes.
make it yours. You should not be selfish as children of God.
Yes, so now we're going to stand up and sing our song. So let's all stand up and sing this song.
Okay, so we've just talked about how selfish Absalom was and how vain he was and how he loved his long hair and he could see himself with the royal robes and sitting on the throne and having all of the powers of the king,
Yeah.
even though the powers of the king belonged to his father, and how he could not wait to be king and how he decided to take the throne from
Away
his
from his
father.
father,
And he
yes.
was being very selfish when he chose to do this. So now we are going to sing a song that will remind us that we need to be generous because God is generous to us.
Yes.
So we need to always be generous. So everyone stand up and help us sing this song.
Yeah.
Our God is generous. He gave himself for us. Our God's not selfish. He didn't keep things for himself. Our God is generous. He made us part of his family. So that's why we should all be generous too. Our God is generous. He gave himself for us. Our God's not selfish. He didn't keep things for himself. Our God is generous. He made us part of his family. So that's why we should all be generous too. Our God is generous. He gave himself for us. Our God's not selfish. He didn't keep things for himself. Our God is generous. He made us part of his family. So that's why we should all be generous too. So that's why we should all be generous too. So that's why we should all be generous too. Yay! So it's time for us to do our craft. Now, we've just talked about Absalom and how David has allowed Absalom to come back to Jerusalem, but he had refused to see him, and then eventually he said, okay, I will see him. And then Absalom created his own plans to become king and overthrow his father, and he created all these schemes and all of these plans because he was very, very selfish and very, very vain. But and one of the things he really, really loved about himself was his hair.
And his good looks.
But mostly his hair. And he loved his hair especially. And remember, he said he only cut his hair once a year, and he thought that his hair was worth its own weight in gold. So imagine he put a price tag on his hair. So now we are going to make Absalom, or a small version of Absalom, and we're going to put his hair on, his very nice long hair, and we're going to put a price tag on it. So that we remember that Absalom was very selfish and he was very vain, and we need to remember not to be like that. We cannot be selfish, we cannot be vain, because remember, David forgave him for killing his son, his own brother, and yet he still decided to do all of these bad things because he really wanted to be king. So now we're gonna make Absalom. So let's make Absalom. So what we have is a string that we'll use as his hair. Then we have a ribbon and something that we've created in the shape of a price tag that we will tie to the ribbon and then to the hair. Then we have these oval manila papers that we've cut into the oval shape, and this will be his eyes. And then finally we have this big rectangular manila paper, and this will be Absalom's body. So let's start with the body. So take this rectangular manila paper, and I need you to roll it so that it looks like a cylinder. So roll it till it looks like a cylinder. Make sure that it is equal and okay to be shaped, and then take your stapler and just staple it shut so it's connected, so nothing is moving. Ask help if you need, because this can be very tricky, because you need to make sure it is completely secure, because this is going to be his body. So use as many staples as you need so that it can be completely secure. So this is Absalom's body. Remember, it looks like a roll. So this will be his body, and with his body we'll put his eyes. And this is also where we're going to write our memory verse for the lesson, so we remember where this lesson is from. So now that we have his body, we need to work on his eyes. So put the body aside and take the two white oval shapes. So these are going to be his eyes. He has very big eyes. So we're just going to draw a semicircle through the middle of this shape, and then we're going to color it in. So this is going to be his eyes. So just make sure it's colored in black all the way so it looks like the pupil of an eye. So fill it in black. You can use the color, you can use your pencil itself, but make sure it's all filled in. And we're going to do the same thing with the other one. So we have two eyes for Absalom that he used to constantly look at his good looks and constantly admire his hair. Remember, we said Absalom thought that he looked like he was the most good-looking man, most handsome man in the whole land. And he looked at himself and he could imagine himself with the robes and the royal garments and everything, with his hair flowing. And that is why he believed that he should be king, and he wanted it so bad, and he wasn't even sure that he could wait for his father to die. So now that's when he began thinking that he needs to overthrow his father. And this was very wrong, because David by this time had forgiven Absalom with his whole heart, and he had embraced him and hugged him. When he allowed Absalom to come and see him, he hugged him and he loved him, because now his son was back and now they were friends again. But Absalom took advantage of this and decided that he wanted to be king, and said he was going to do this for himself. So after you finish filling in your eyes, Absalom's eyes, make sure they're very, very dark and they look like eyes, and you can't see any white part under the semicircle. And once you have these eyes, you're going to take your glue stick and you're going to glue them onto the Absalom body that we have just come from rolling. So just put glue on one eye and take Absalom's body and just stick the eye to the center of it. Not the side where you can see the staples, on the other side, the clear side. Make sure it's stuck. And do the same thing with the other eye and stick it right next to the other one. So now Absalom has 2 eyes. Make sure they're stuck down properly. And this is our Absalom. So because everything else we're going to be adding on is an add-on, I'm going to write our scripture so that once we have Absalom ready to stand, he's just ready to stand completely. So take your pen and close to the bottom, just write 2 Samuel. 2 Samuel chapter 14, verse 25 to 26. And this is where we find the story of Absalom and how he decided to overthrow his father even after his father had forgiven him and allowed him back home. He still decided to do this to his father. So now that we've written our scripture, the next thing we need to do is we need to give Absalom his hair, because Absalom's hair was the longest, the best hair. He never cut it, only cut it once a year. Yeah. So we need to give Absalom hair because this was his favorite part of himself. So we need to give him hair.
Yeah.
So put your Absalom roll aside, put your glue aside, and take your string. Now with this string, you need to be very careful because we need all of this hair. We need it to be on Absalom. So we're going to take all of it as it is and just place it inside this roll. And we're going to staple it. Now for this, you need several staples and you need to be very careful so that you make sure all of his hair
is stuck on his head.
So once you've placed that, make sure you don't staple it completely to him. Just put that above and just staple and keep stapling until you feel like it's firm and it's secure. Yeah. And it's not gonna move around too much, but it's still going to be able to move. And once you've stapled it, take it and separate it. So we have Absalom's hair. It's very long hair.
Absalom's long hair.
That is.
We need to give him a mouth.
Oh yes, we need to give him a mouth because this is what he used. He used to talk to the people and convince them to love him more than his father.
Yeah.
So staple his hair, spread it, make sure it's secure. Staple a little bit more until you know for sure his hair won't move around too much. And then because we need to give him a mouth, just take your pencil and draw a mouth, and we'll draw him smiling because he's very proud. So we'll draw him smiling. So give him a big smiling mouth. And give him a big smiling mouth. Does he need a nose also?
Yeah.
Okay, let's give him a nose. And that is Absalom. Now another thing that Absalom did is he put a price on his head, on his hair. He said that his hair is worth its weight in gold. That means if he weighed his hair and weighed 200 kgs, that means he deserved 200
kgs
of gold. Imagine, all for hair. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a price tag on his hair. So put Absalom down and take your price tag and your ribbon. So we need your ribbon to be a thin strip. Put it through your price tag, which we have put a hole in. We used a paper punch to put a hole in. Tie this around. Make sure it's secure, and then tie it to Absalom's hair. Any part of his hair. Just make sure you tie the price tag to his hair. Make sure it's secure, it's not moving. And now Absalom's hair has a price tag. So we're going to say worth its weight in gold. So that's what we're going to write on the price tag. Worth its weight in gold. because he thought his hair was very, very expensive because of how amazing it is.
So very Absalom.
So now we have Absalom, his hair, his price tag, his expensive hair, exactly. Okay, so now we have Absalom, his hair, its price tag, and we remember where this story is from, and remember what we've learned from this story. From this story, we have learned that we should not be selfish, we should not be vain, we need to always love each other and never be too selfish. It's important for you not to be selfish at all.
So this is our lesson today. I hope we made yours look like a person, like mine does. So until next time, bye.
Bye.